There are only 3 weeks left on the Contender Series, which sucks because the Contender Series has been a very profitable way for us to make some money. Episode number 8, we got 5 fights to break down. There's some decent matchups. I don't think overall the skill level of these fighters, I don't think many of them will go far in the UFC. But at the end of the day, it's kind of what I said last week. And we've still broke it down and we made some money. We've been profitable in 6 out of the 7 weeks so far. We're up over 15 units. Let's look to keep it going because Tuesday night fights, we really can't go wrong. Let's take a look at how things have been going down on the Contender Series. So favorites have been winning. They've won 24 of the 34 fights that have gone on in the Contender Series, and underdogs last week were 2 and 3. So before we get into the picks, the breakdowns, I want to address something because a lot of people saw me cash on Danilo Voivodkin last week, round 1 finish. And they're like, oh, you picked Bailey Schoenfelder on the show. What is that about? Let me tell you this, boys. Picks and bets are very different. Who I think should probably win usually comes down to who I think should be favored. And I don't know that Danilo should have been favored. I think he was a rightful underdog. But at the end of the day, he was a plus 500 underdog. And in no world that I see that Bailey Schoenfelder should be a minus 850 or minus 1,000 favorite. I think he closed at minus 1,000. He shouldn't be that big of a favorite. It's heavyweight. He's a smaller guy. He's been tagged in a lot of his fights. And we didn't know a lot about Danilo Voivodkin because he had fought very low-level competition. But we did know that he had all first-round knockouts, that he had a background in kickboxing, or at least karate kickboxing. So I think the guy was definitely worth a shot. Considering the line, I bet it at plus 1,200 round 1 finish. I think that was a great bet. It hit. And that's what we're looking to do with the bets. Picks and bets are very, very different. So just keep that in mind. I'll give you a pick, but also try to give you some betting advice throughout this video. But I also told you last week that the underdogs could be live on this card. I took 3 dog shots. 2 of them hit. Well, technically, I took 4 because I got one of them as an underdog, but she closed the favorite. We hit that one. But, you know, it's a fun way to make some money on Contender Series, man. Dogs usually are profitable over the long term because you always get one of these plus 600 dogs that comes through. But favorites have been cracking, but, you know, we're getting a lot of big chalk favorites. But let's get into it, man. We got 5 fights to break down. Let's start it off. Christien Savoie and Jacobe Smith. I think Jacobe Smith is the clear A side in this matchup. The dude is a really solid prospect, I believe. I mean, he's 8-0. He's coming off 2 big knockouts, which is very, it's great to see because the guy is a wrestler. The guy is from Oklahoma State Wrestling, very accomplished wrestler in college. He's been training. He's friends with Nick Piccinini, who we saw earlier on the Contender Series, who won his fight, but I think he probably should have lost. I think Jacobe Smith's getting an easier matchup here in Christien Savoie because Jack Duffy against Piccinini, Jack Duffy's a solid fighter. I'm not saying that Christien Savoie is a bad fighter by any means, but I do think Jacobe Smith is the rightful favorite. He's a pretty large favorite. I think he's about minus 500. I capped him to be around minus 350, but they think it's a little bit more than that. That's okay. I can kind of agree with it. Not that I would bet on Jacobe Smith at minus 500. I'm not a guy that bets minus 500s. I don't think I ever do. It's not worth it to me. But in this matchup, I think Jacobe Smith can get takedowns on Savoie. Savoie, a Canada guy who has been fighting on the regional scene there, and the level of competition is just not good. It's not good at all. And honestly, the only time that he's gone outside and he's fought in an actual decent promotion, he fought Basil Hafez, a really solid opponent. He got finished in the first round. Now, this draw that he has on his record, I think he should have lost that fight. Didn't look good in that fight. So really, I think he should be 10-2. And Jacobe Smith really hasn't shown many flaws. I mean, he's really not fighting the best guys either. I mean, he's been fighting in Fury FC, I think, which is a decent promotion. I mean, it's a promotion in Texas, and there's some okay guys, but it's really hard to get like a prospect versus a prospect on a regional scene. You usually got a prospect and a guy that, you know, is kind of going in there, maybe looking to make an upset, but probably not. Jacobe Smith's look good. I mean, he can get takedowns. He's very strong. He was wrestling, I think, about 175. I think that was his weight class. 170 kind of makes sense for him. Very strong. Guy is built. He can get takedowns. His hands look like they're coming along, got solid ground and pound, and his cardio looks solid. Christian Savoie, on the other hand, I don't think his takedown defense is going to look great in this one, but he is a very big guy. He's fought at light heavyweight before, and I just watched the face-offs. He's a little bit bigger than Jacobe Smith. I think he's going to be very strong in there, but I think eventually Jacobe Smith will probably just try to wear him down, and he could win a decision, but he's also going to be very, very dangerous in the first round with those hands. And Savoie is dangerous on the feet. He's more of a striker. He's going to want to jump in with a 1-2, and he could crack Jacobe Smith, but at this point, I just don't really believe too much in Savoie to pull off an upset here. I think Jacobe Smith gets this one done. He's not 6'2". Tapology is crazy. No way he's 6'2". He's like more like 5'9", 5'10", because he was about an inch or two shorter than Savoie. But younger guy, much better prospect, clear A side in this one. Jacobe Smith is the pick. I wouldn't bet a minus 500 almost ever in UFC or in MMA, I should say, because anything can happen. I know he could go in there and blow his load early and gas out, or he could get cold cocked in the first round. So again, probably wouldn't bet on Jacobe Smith, but I do think he's the favorite. I do think he wins. And I'm kind of leaning towards a decision, just because I think Savoie, we get these guys on Contender Series, lots on the line. It's going to be tough. You're going to have to knock a dude out cold, basically, because they're going in there looking to make their dreams come true. They're not going to just lay down to anybody, So I think Jacobe Smith probably wins a decision here. Moving on, we got Abdellah Ramy and the return of Torrez Finney. Torrez Finney, man. I don't know what to think of the guy. We all know the game plan. We know the game plan of the guy is to just impose his will, go for takedowns, use his strength. But on the feet, he's very bad. He is not very good. And I think there could be some holes for Ramy to exploit when they're on the feet, but he's got to stuff takedowns. It's pretty clear that Dana does not like Torrez Finney. And I can't blame him. I really can't. Because the guy gets takedowns. He's obviously very strong. He'll pick you up and slam you. But once he has you on the ground, it's very tough for him to do damage, just considering he's so short. And usually when you're doing damage on the ground, you're in a position where you have really heavy top pressure, or at least you're heavy on top, and your opponent can't go anywhere, but he's so short, he can't really smother a guy. So he can get takedowns, but he doesn't do damage on the ground. We saw in his last fight, he was fighting a much taller guy than Ramy. I think he was about 6'2", 6'3", Cam Rouston, and he won 29-28, but he got takedowns, he didn't do much damage, and he did take some shots. It was a good win for him, I guess, because I don't think Cam Rouston's a bad fighter by any means. But going into this matchup, the golden boy here, Abdellah Ramy, fighting out of Spain. He fought on PFL Europe, I think it was, his last fight, which was at light heavyweight. He was an underdog there. He got a first-round knockout, and I thought he looked pretty good. He got taken down, I think, maybe 2 or 3 times initially, but he got back up to his feet and knocked him out within the first 3 minutes of the fight. I think the guy's dangerous on the feet. I think his boxing is really solid. I think his combinations are fast, and I think he hits hard. And considering he fought at light heavyweight, he's a big dude. Like, he's thick. He's a little bit taller than Torrez Finney. I think he's about 3 inches taller. I don't think he's 4 inches. I just watched the face-offs, and he didn't look 4 inches taller than him. I think probably 2 or 3. If he can match the physicality of Torrez Finney and he can keep this fight on the feet, I think he's got a good chance. But I do think Torrez Finney's wrestling will be the main factor here. But my question is, considering he's got 2 wins on the Contender Series and he doesn't have a contract yet, is he going to change his game plan? Like, is he going to change his game plan to the point where he feels like he needs a knockout to get a contract? Or does he just go in there and thinks, a win will get me a contract if he just keeps winning? I tend to lean more to the side of if he just keeps winning, he'll probably get a contract. But I don't think Dana likes this guy. The way that he was talking to him was crazy. And then he brings him back on the Contender Series, and he's like, all right, you got to show me something. So even if he wins, I don't know if he gets a contract. Because unless he gets some kind of stoppage, a ground and pound stoppage, or just cold cocks him, I don't know. Betting wise, I capped Torrez Finney about a -150, -160. I think he's up more towards like a minus 240 at this point. Not worth it in my opinion. Just because he doesn't do damage on the ground, his submission package really ain't there. You're basically betting on takedowns and his cardio and his ability to not get knocked out. And I think in this spot, Ramy's a much more dangerous guy on the feet. And with Torrez' lack of being able to do anything on top, I'm going to side with the underdog. Like, I'll just take Ramy for the pick because I think there's a path there. But he's got his tough takedowns, and his cardio's got to hold up. So Ramy's my pick. He's the underdog. The picks really don't mean anything. I might put some money on Ramy just because I think the line is a little bit wide, and I don't know how Finney's going to fight. If he fights normally, then I think he can win. But if he doesn't, it's not a good look. So very disgusting fight, in my opinion. I don't think Finney would do well in the UFC. So I can kind of see where Dana's coming from. Because he's so short and he's so hittable on the feet, he's literally takedown or bust. If he can't get takedowns, he's not doing well. So, Ramy's big. We got a good matchup here. David Martinez, Xavier Franklin. I think this is probably one of the better matchups on the card just because I think both guys are pretty solid. David Martinez, he is the brother of UFC fighter Melissa Martinez, who was 0-1 in the UFC, and we haven't seen her in like a year and a half, maybe 2 years. I can't even remember the last time she fought. I don't know where she's been, but she's in the UFC. And David Martinez is a guy that has been on the radar of promotions for a good amount of time. I was doing my research, and one thing I like to do is look at their Instagrams, just kind of see what they're up to, where they're training at. And this dude had a post from back in like 2022, I think it was, where he was on the list of top 25 fighters under 25 years old. And he was number 25. I was like, it's pretty wild for a guy that's like not signed to a major promotion. But the guy is pretty solid. You watch his fights, I don't think his style is really going to be that exciting for the Contender Series unless he lands some kind of knockout, because he fights at range. He uses his footwork. He stays to the outside. He kind of forces you to make a move, and then he counters off of that. He's got a real nice right counter strike. He'll slap low kicks, and the low kicks aren't really slapping. They're pretty hard. So I think he's going to try to dance around the cage, land hard low kicks, and land big shots on Xavier Franklin whenever he tries to close the distance or to push the pressure. And I think it's a decent game plan because Xavier Franklin, to me, first of all, before we get into Franklin, these heights are definitely off. I just watched the face-offs. Martinez looked an inch or two short, or inch or two taller than Xavier Franklin. So he's definitely not 5'5". I'd probably say he's 5'7", maybe 5'8". So that's one thing to note. Can't really look at the numbers and believe it. Just go watch the face-offs. But Xavier Franklin, undefeated guy. I think he's an explosive athlete, and he has some real nice combinations when he goes, but I just think he's going to have a tough time finding the range on David Martinez when he's using that outside footwork. If he had some more wrestling, I would be a little bit more inclined to take Xavier Franklin just because I think he's a strong guy, very physical, and he hits hard, but he just hasn't really been a wrestler throughout his fights. And I think that's something that you kind of need to bring into a game plan with David Martinez, because there's been times in Martinez's fights where he can get taken down, and he has solid takedown defense, but when he gets taken down, he can be held there for a little bit, and he tries to get up by giving up his back. People have threatened him with rear naked chokes. He eventually got out of it. I mean, he's 10-1. He's only had one loss, and he's had a lot of nice finishes, but he's a very patient guy. And I think the patience in this matchup will probably frustrate Xavier Franklin to the point where he could find himself getting countered with big shots. So I'm going to go with David Martinez. I just think overall he's a more technical guy. I think he's got a better game right now. I think Xavier Franklin is not a guy that we can write off. He's still, he's young in his career, 5-0. I think he'll probably be back here. He's a good fighter. But for now, I got to go with David Martinez. I think he probably wins this by late stoppage or maybe a decision. I think he's currently sitting about minus 165. I capped him around minus 190, minus 200. So maybe some value on Martinez, but this is featherweights and a guy that that kind of dances around the outside. I don't know that I would lay. I will see. I don't know if I'd lay it, but maybe he fights different. That's another thing. Like, the guy's usually very patient. If he comes out here just looking different, then you could throw anything out the window. That's something we'll talk about too on this next slide, because we could take a look at the recap from last week. Plus 3.55 units. We hit Tainara. We lost on Mazzeo. Going back to that, it's like Francisco Mazzeo had no reason to be shooting takedowns on, what was his name? Kevin Christien. No reason. He's never done that ever. And then he starts shooting takedowns. Like, that's not something I could have never predicted. This guy's shooting takedowns. There's no reason he should be doing that. And then another thing is like Rose Conceição. She's getting her ass whooped on the feet. Maybe try to mix in a takedown. You know, she's a Brazilian national champion wrestler. That's probably your best attribute. She didn't shoot a single takedown the entire fight. So, very dumb. Sometimes you just can't predict how these fighters are going to approach the fight. But hit the nice over 1.5 Vallejos KO, and then we hit the Voivodkin round 1 finish there at plus 1,200, which was nice. We lost 2 out of the 3 DFS slips. We got a push on that one because it literally landed at exactly 8.5. So that was a nice little push there because we almost would have lost it. But DFS was a little off the charts there. We lock in for next week. But if you want all these bets, jump in the Homo Fight Picks premium membership. Use the code DANA, and you'll get a free 5-day trial. So there's a link down in the description. Join the Homo Fight Picks on Winnable. Use code DANA. You'll get a 5-day free trial. On the year for sportsbook bets, so straight bets and parlays, we're positive 36.21 units. And on DFS, we're positive 45.52 units. So, and a Contender Series alone, I mean, I said at the top of the show, we're positive, or we're profitable in 6 out of the 7 cards. So we're doing well there. Contender Series has been a very bright spot. Last week on UFC Paris, I got wrecked, but Contender Series has been very consistent, which is very shocking to me, but we've been making the right reads, doing the research, and things have come to fruition. So join the link. Links down in the description. Join up, code Dana for 5-day free trial. Got 2 more fights. We got Alberto Montes and Carlos Calderon. So Calderon's taking this fight on short notice, and that does scare me a little bit because Calderon is a guy that goes for broke. He's an aggressive striker on the feet, and he doesn't really care if you take him down because at his base, he's a grappler. He's a grappler who's just going to be very aggressive on the feet, and he's like, I don't care if I overextend myself. You could take me down, and I'm going to be fine with it. Which is good and bad. But on the feet, he's just so wild. Taking this fight on short notice, I fear that he could start to gas out if it goes into the late second, into the third. Because he fights very aggressive, and he goes for the finish. On the ground, he's a... I don't want to say he's a guard player, but considering he's willing to go to his back, he tries to lock up stuff. He'll try to look for legs. He'll look for arms. And he's looking to finish the fight, which I can respect. And I honestly love to watch. He trains at elevation, which is nice. So maybe the cardio will be better. But the short notice scares me a little bit. I know we saw some fighters already on the Contender Series take fights on short notice and start to gas out just because of that. His opponent, Alberto Montes, is a very weird guy to me because this guy was supposed to fight Steve Garcia on the Contender Series like 5 years ago. He pulls out of that fight and never really got another opportunity until now. So this guy's been winning some fights, and then you see this loss here, and you go back and watch it. He got starched, like a very weird KO. Like it could have just been a fluke, but he kind of got touched on the chin, and he just went out cold. So I don't know if this guy's chinny or what, but you look at his last couple fights, and you see a pretty solid striker who doesn't really throw his hands too much. He really likes to fight behind the kicks, and he's been getting a couple submissions just based on taking advantage of spots where guys are shooting takedowns on him, and he's locking stuff up. If you look at his last one, I think he hit an anaconda or a darce. He hit a darce and then an anaconda, I think it was, his last 2 fights. And the guy shot a takedown, and he locked that up like real quick. So that's going to be there in this spot because I think Calderon, is going to look to try to take your head off, but then he could shoot a takedown, and we've already seen that Montez's front headlock series is pretty good. So this guy trains out of the Goat Shed too, which I like. I think Goat Shed is a really solid gym, and they have a crazy record. I think Awesome Zadie is the owner of the Goat Shed, Karate Combat president, President Awesome. He has like the record of the Goat Shed fighters, and it is a pretty crazy record. So I like that for him. He's been a guy that's been training down in South Florida for a while. He was at MMA Masters. So I think he's been getting some good training in. I think he should be the favorite here, but I don't know that it should be as wide as it is. You know, Montes, I think, is currently at like minus 300 something. I capped him more like minus 200 something. And just considering how wild Calderon fights, like there's going to be a lot of variability in this fight. So I probably wouldn't lay the chalk on Montes. I am going to pick him for a pick here because I think he has the ability to submit Calderon. Calderon's been submitted. And on the feet, I think he's a little bit more technical. But Calderon's going to bring the fight. And I can respect that. And he can go out there and finish Montes, no doubt about it. So Calderon, probably a live dog. I'd probably say the values on Calderon. But my pick here is going to be Alberto Montes. And lastly, we got some light heavyweight action here. Diyar, Nurgozhay, and Bartosz. Not even going to try to say that. I'm just going to call him Bartosz. It's a weird one. These weird matchups, man. Because I look at this guy, Diyar, and I'm just not impressed. Like, I wish this guy, I mean, he's 9-0. Obviously never lost. I don't think he's ever really looked bad in a fight. But I just don't really see much like aggression. I don't see much killer instinct. He's got a good amount of decisions on his record. And when he's getting these TKOs, they're literally TKOs. Like guys that get put on in positions where he can take advantage of it. But he's not really out here just knocking dudes out. His striking is very low volume. Not a lot of movement. The guy is very plotty. He throws a leg kick, resets. Throws a leg kick, resets. And a lot of guys have tried to wrestle him, and they could get him down to the ground, but then he usually reverses position, gets on top, and he can hold guys there from on top. I think his wrestling will probably play a big factor in this one against Bartosz, because on the feet, I think Bartosz is just going to be a lot more active. I think he's going to be throwing the hands a lot more. I don't think Nurgozhay really throws a lot of hands. At range, he just likes to throw kicks and keep this fight kind of slow. Maybe he's just scared of gassing out. And a lot of his fights have gone to a decision, and he's kind of just had to weather getting tired. Like, he just kind of tries to fight through it. And it works because he's a little bit less tired. He's a little bit more efficient with his striking. Bartosz, I think, is the better striker here. I think his hands are a lot more dangerous. I think his movement's a little bit better. Not as plotty as Nurgozhay. But if he gets into the clinch with Nurgozhay, I think Nurgozhay could probably take him down. And he's probably going to give up minutes on the ground if he gets taken down because Nurgozhay's top pressure is pretty solid. And he doesn't really try to do a ton of damage, but he really just tries to hold you there. He'll land a couple elbows. Not really going to be looking for submissions. But Bartosz on the feet, I think, is very live. Maybe not for a knockout because I think Nurgozhay is pretty solid defensively, but I think he could just win the minutes on the feet. So to me, it's a minute winner on the feet or a minute winner on the ground. Which one are you going to go for? I'm going to go for the Polish guy here in Bartosz. I think he's more dangerous on the feet. I think he's got more volume, and I think he could pull off a victory here. If it goes 3 rounds, I think he might be the one doing more damage. If he gets taken down, he's just got to work to get back up because if he can't get back up, he's just giving up the fight because Nurgozhay is going to be content to just lay in his guard and win that way. Now, I say all that, but then this is the Contender Series, and maybe they fight different. Maybe Nurgozhay comes out with more aggression, really wanting a contract, and it could look completely different than his past fights. But from what I've seen, just not a guy that's very active in the cage. Like, he just kind of seems like he's coasting. Don't really like that. So I'm going to go with the Polish guy here in Bartosz. I think he gets the win. And I could see it probably being a decision, honestly, because I don't think Nurgozhay is chinny by any means. I just don't know that he's really going to overextend himself to get hit with anything too big. But yeah, light heavyweights, usually a lot of variability, and we'll see. We'll see. This card is pretty gross on matchups and to me because they just don't really know how these guys are going to fight. But that's usually the case week in and week out. But we have done pretty well. So appreciate you for watching. Hit the like button for me. Hit the subscription button for me, because if you're not subscribed yet, 70% of you guys are not subscribed, but you view every video. So please hit the subscription button for me if you haven't yet. We'll be back here with Contender Series next week. We got the official picks for UFC 307 on Wednesday, Best Bet Show on Friday. Till next time, HF Picks. Yeah.